So my name is Don Foster, Senior Director of Product Management for Commvault. We're about ready to talk about the cloud orchestration, provisioning, and management that we can provide for customers here at Tech Field Day. And we'll probably also finish with a bit of a purchasing and value discussion just before we close off. So let me go into, and this will be where we'll use a little bit of PowerPoint. And don't shoot me for it too terribly. From a VM perspective, and this just pulls together all the interfaces versus me trying to click through it in the amount of time that we have left, you'll get the idea of what we're able to do here. So when it comes to provisioning, we can give people a number of rights for who can actually create VMs and not create VMs. This can go inside of your hypervisor like VMware and or Hyper-V, and also play in Amazon or Azure. So what we're able to do here is just work off of our provisioning policies. As you can see, the name, cluster nodes, volumes, templates, all the different details we can select from, and then of course what sort of cores, memory allocation that we actually want to provide for those virtual machines can be selected and driven then by that user. It can be done through our console, or it can also be done through the end user self-service console. So we talked about some of those user-specific consoles. They're not always looking at our master GUI. This gives the ability to actually do that sort of thing, create new instances, again, based upon the actual hypervisor they have access to, and generate those virtual machines. Once that person has done it, they are basically named as the owner, and they're able to power them up, shut them down, snapshot them, protect them, whatever is necessary in their private public cloud environment, all driven through that web console web services. That's a part of what we've been doing with our REST APIs and trying to drive a lot of the integration. We talked about the actual archive. Don't need to spend too much time on the cloud use cases. Dev and test is pretty obvious when we talk about how we can actually migrate some of these virtual machines from one hypervisor layer to another. So one of the key things that we can do here is, as we're actually managing the actual key information inside the data center, if I want to maneuver that data that's in production development and store it out to another content location, another cloud model, I've got the ability to actually maneuver that data and help save that hypervisor time. Let me show you the actual component that does that here. So, and this is actually inside of, that's PM. This one is the one that is inside of Azure, I believe.
So is this a sort of vRealize automation light kind of thing? A lab manager, a vCloud director, that kind of provisioning workflow engine?
You could think of it that way. Management. Absolutely, okay. Absolutely. So in this case, I believe this one is being created in Azure. Let's see here, Windows, VMLP, Hold on a second.
Thank you.
Let me actually go back. Yeah, that's all we're going to do in the PowerPoint. Let me actually just go back and show it from here. So let me go into Amazon AMI. So let me just go to my provisioning policies just to give you the high-level idea of what this means. So we have the end-user console. Let's actually look at these things. And actually, I want the other lab. That's why I had to. Come on, wake up.
Well, quick thing, Robbie, I don't know if you know, how is this all licensed? Is it the amount of data you store, or because you're touching so many different things?
So we can license in multiple different ways. We recently launched the ability to license per VM or per socket. And we can do that. We can do that based on, you can license different levels of functionality. So if you just want streaming VADP backups, we can license that piece. If you want to add snapshot integration, we can license that piece in addition to that. We can license the VM provisioning separately. We can license the VM archiving separately. All that way, you're only paying for the functionality you use, and it's tracked just like your virtual environment.
Can you buy bundles to simplify it? Because you're also going to do file data, exchange data, SQL data that may have nothing to do with your virtualization environment.
Correct. Sure.
They license separately per node or per endpoint or amount of data?
So endpoint, it can be licensed per endpoint node. We can. It all depends on the level of functionality you want. We can license
choose
all of it together in capacity.
So you can choose how you would like to be licensed.
Exactly.
Right.
And we'll help you find whatever's simplest or what's
Sounds
most
like
cost
the
effective.
Microsoft model. It's like
Yeah.
there's risk there.
Is it complicated
Really
or
need to know the licensing.
yeah? Is it complicated or is it something you sort of fill in and you go, I've got, I don't know, different ways? Because yeah, it sounds as though licensing is a pain in the backside. It can get horrendously complicated. The more options there are, the harder it is to do it. Is there an issue from your side, or you're just saying you've got so many options, it's better for customer choice? Yeah.
Give me 1 second.
We'd be happy
Give me
to
1
tell you-
second. I'll showcase that too.
Overbuy your licenses.
Just in case. True up, but don't true down. Yeah.
So we've basically we're trying to simplify the model as we go, and we've got as we've got customers that have licensed on capacity for a long time, and that was really simple. You just needed to know how much capacity you had, but then other folks want to consume a different way. We've made it where you can consume however makes the most sense for your business.
Can I buy like a per socket license but use S3 where I have no sockets and then it's free and I can back up everything to the cloud?
Well,
That work for me?
we've got some rules built in for that kind of situation, but we can't.
Mathematically, I think that works out.
Yeah, sockets. Like, what's a socket in Azure?
Exactly, and that's why we've in addition to the socket, we give you the option to license per VM or per
That's why I
cloud
want a license per
instance.
socket when you don't know what it means.
So sockets won't work in a cloud environment, obviously, because there's no concept of a socket. So in that case, we'd say license per virtual machine.
So what's cheaper, to back up a SQL server as a SQL backup and put it into Azure, or back up the whole VM in Azure or on-prem and then move it to? Can you give me a sense of which model is most cost-effective? Because the cloud is an OpEx model, right?
It really depends on the situation.
Okay.
So as a scenario, I just wanted to pull this up, right?
Yep.
And so foundation. If I just want to do VM backup recovery, I'm talking about 1270 a socket or similar per 10 VMs. I think it is.
Yep.
I think it's the same price on per 10 VMs or per socket. So as you consolidate more VMs on a socket basis, it may make more sense to do a VM purchase level. Some customers want to buy on socket. It's really up to you. If you want to start working in the Amazon scenario, right? That's where we can add on our advanced data protection and/or our VM cloud management. At that point, it says starting at 605 with a 10 pack. You have to do this per VM because of your point. There is no concept of sockets. How do I socketize Amazon? We do it off the number of VMs from that perspective.
And it's a trust-based licensing though. Or it's with a license handler that actually monitors what you're doing.
It's both. It is a trust-based.
No, what do you mean it's both?
The reason I say it's both is if you license 100 VMs for cloud management, you can actually go over. You can oversubscribe yourself, and the software will keep working to a point. It will squawk at you and let you know, hey, your license says X, you're using Y. Just note, you might want.
It's licensing model with warnings.
Here you go.
As opposed to trust-based, where it's like, yeah,
Do whatever you want.
we only have 3 servers. 35,000 servers.
So
I know there's other stuff you want to show, so it was just a quick question on the licensing. There are plenty of options.
Correct.
So-
Correct. And the reason we made it this, I mean, yes, it's primarily one entry path, and you can choose which options you need to add in, archiving, cloud management, and some of the advanced IntelliSnap components. But the whole key here is when you start talking about value, and we'll go into that at the very end before we end, we'll show how this actually aligns to value in the market against other solutions, especially if you're just looking for simple backup, which still many customers are trying to find the right way to do virtual machine protection. These other components are definite needs, but many are still trying to solve this component. How do I have something that scales, that grows, that's cost effective, and will help me open?
You're still primarily selling yourselves as a backup and recovery product, but there's a lot of other stuff. Because that's sort of what you're saying. The foundation is VM backup and recovery. Is that just from the VM bit, or is another whole licensing separate foundation for file analytics, file sucking?
Yeah,
data?
there is a whole other set of
Okay.
licenses, and that's a whole other conversation.
This foundation is just for the VM bit.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And the reason why we are talking more backup is because let's look at the market. We still have a lot of market that we can help to showcase what our solution can do. And while we want to be known for these advanced features, we know that right now the sweet spot is still just give me the best virtual machine protection solution I can find that scales, it's cost effective, and can give me other options to grow into.
My only concern is that there are many other companies that do backup and have done for many years, and some of the messaging that people still think of Commvault as a backup company, which you are, but there's so much more. Once you've got the data, you can do huge amounts of stuff with it. But I think people are still thinking of Commvault as a semantic net backup or doing what parts of Veeam do or those other kind of things. And I think that's one of your marketing issues, is to overcome that.
We would agree with you probably. In fact, I know we would. And those are things that we're working to also overcome. By the way, one other major change that we've done when it comes to letting customers have access to our software, you can download what we've got and show how simple it really is. It's on our website. You can get it for 30 days free.
30 days. I need 60 to validate to his point earlier.
I'm going to need at least the 365 day.
So,
But don't you want
question.
your customer? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Don't you want your customers to back up more VMs and then there are more inside your system? You seem to be punishing more backups. I'm sorry, by licensing the VMs, I'm going to back up less of them, most likely. Is that?
No, you're going to back up more of them because you're going to back up all of them, and you're going to pay for it.
I'm going to start tiering my backups. Aren't I? If I have to pay per VM backup.
I don't know.
All customers are different, right? It really comes back to what OpEx model they want to follow for how they have to continue scaling that solution. And the net result here is, at least they know with this, they can grow to 20,000 plus VMs, and they can continue to add that scale based on this cost. So if I have a new application I'm going to roll in, it's going to mean infrastructure for another 150 VMs. At least for data protection, you can do the math and note, okay, based on the features that we need, here's our software costs year in and year out to continue to protect those.
So I can back up every VM in my environment to one VM and pay per VM, but only pay for one.
So if you ran a script in the background that did all of that,
And you don't care.
So what
it would
about?
be up to you to understand how to unwind all that under the covers. But
somebody's going to do it, right?
There's always been ways to hack the
Yeah, I
game,
mean,
try to save on licensing, whereas you
I'm
could just
thinking
pay
database
the frickin'
backups,
licensing.
having
That's gonna bite
there actually
you've
are a
got a
number of
product to
customers
work
that will
with.
use one VM as their centralized dump location. It does sometimes get challenging though on getting all that data back and managing the growth of that one dump
And
location.
if you do that, then you lose a whole lot of the transparency and stuff, right?
Oh,
Because
absolutely.
I mean, it's like zipping a zip file. Yeah, you can do it, but you don't get to see the contents of the zip file.
But I'm thinking, say, a scenario where, I don't know, maybe your DBAs might be backing up SQL backups, doing SQL backups to one central repository.
So you're wanting it to be a repository is what you're wanting, right?
Right. Versus
So why not do
doing
like
regular
NFS?
backups, doing log transactions, transaction logs and stuff like that. Even taking that and moving it to one VM on this is better than what they potentially would have in the other scenario.
Could be.
Yeah, but they could do that today, irrespective of a backup platform. And let me correct that. Most likely, your DBAs are performing backup to disk and then dumping them to a repository today, irrespective of the backup platform that you are or are not running.
So what
Because
if-
oftentimes
what if-
they do that.
What if your DBAs were doing backups to RDMs?
That's your choice if you control the virtual infrastructure. But they have the ability to access disk and go and do things and consume extra disk space and more disk space and more disk space.
Absolutely.
And that's why we always give them a reasonably unexpected amount of disk space, more than they asked for in the first place, because DBAs can be consumptive.
Absolutely.
When you were talking about licensing earlier, so in my vSphere environment, if I'm licensed by cores, right? What happens when I burst into, let's say, a cloud? Okay, so will it know that I'm now going over here to this model that's not using cores?
When you say you're bursting into a cloud, you're wanting to use some of our features that we're talking about that's all under the cloud management component, which can own the foundation can be licensed on socket, right?
Right.
Any of the advanced components beyond that are based on the number of VMs that use that advanced functionality.
So I would have to add another license.
You'd have to add the tracking for that, and we do the tracking for you, but you would have to pay for that component. Yes.
Okay, so you will stop that. So there's no really trying to
Correct.
sneak.
Yeah.
Basically.
That's a hard component that gets added in or turned on in the XML license file. Yeah.
Does the backup and the archiving and everything, I know it applies to Exchange, does it also apply to Office 365?
So good question there. On Office 365, we have the ability to do things like mailbox archiving and even some compliance journaling from it. But the backup does not apply to Office 365. We don't have controlled database infrastructure for that.
Do you have self-service portal to delegate this to like the help desk or this equal DBA or whoever else in the organisation?
Well, the
Just a
users.
simple looking graphical interface.
So two things. The web interface that you saw some screen captures of, you can do that for VM recovery, file recovery. You can also do that for like file server or even laptop recovery for end users or even a help desk.
Okay.
On the DBA side, right now what we typically do for our DBAs is the GUI in the background. We have role-based security that will lock down the components of the GUI that you don't have rights to and allow you to see access of certain things. Now, I'll be the first. It's great. It's good. Many customers use it and love it. There are things that we can do that are even better. So we're in the process of improving our security model, making it even more granular. We're also in the process of making it so that this interface is not the one the customer or the tenant has to use.
Right.
So that if the SQL admin wants to use SQL Enterprise Manager or SQL Studio and they want to plug in that functions from that, might be a good idea. If they want to plug in from RMAN, well, we already kind of have that anyway, but they want to do things from RMAN, we'll give them that component. Letting them stick with their native tools so they can still understand backup while letting the actual architecture guys that piece it all together do the plumbing, the policies, etc.
That's good.
So going back to that whole data services model and other interfaces, that's something we know that we need to improve upon, and we're actively striving towards it.
So hopefully, quick question. Obviously, pulling in all this data from various places into your content store, in a way it's single instance storage because you're not having a separate journal, separate archive, separate backup, which is reducing disk space. Do you have processes that can go there, that can deduplicate the data, that can compress it, that can squash it up? Because obviously, is that part of your product?
So deduplication, as we talked about in the platform up front, is built into the product. So the moment we touch the information, based on how you choose, it is hashed and deduplicated on the fly, either at the source or at the target, depending on the policy you've defined. So we even allow the product to work globally across policies. Now, usually that's locked into a geolocation because you usually don't want to go across WAN links for how that infrastructure functions. But we can ensure that we can reduce down to the smallest possible set that you are storing across multiple policies for that deduplication. So if we've got 4 or 5 different policies that are talking about disk-based backup, some of it's long-term retention, some of it's archive, some of it's near-term retention, our deduplication is intelligent enough to flag what blocks are a part of longer-term retention and still, clean off the pointers that are meant for that, operational recovery window for backup, and still keep just the one copy of that block, so to speak, inside the infrastructure. Now, there are scaling limits, right? We can basically allow our deduplication to work in parallel right now to what's basically, call it a third to a half of a petabyte of information, depending on how your infrastructure is put together and how you've scaled it out. So when we talk about our deduplication, just at a high level, we can allow 2 infrastructures of deduplication. Bad disk drawing, my apologies. We can allow these 2 guys to basically work as almost like a clustered pair, giving you a larger parallel deduplication backend to kind of fit that policy location. So it's always being deduped as we go. Right now, this sits at two pieces. We're working to expand that to 4 to 8 here in the very near future, right? So you can see that we're going to have more and more storage efficiency. And the other key component is because everything we do is software based, as we collect the VM data, as we collect the file data and retain it for longer term, it can also all be encrypted and compressed and still deduplicated. You don't lose any of those data management capabilities in how we actually store the information down.
Cool, thank you.
Okay. So just to finish up here on the provisioning component for Amazon, right? Just to showcase how this works. I've got an Amazon policy. I'm choosing Amazon AMI. I can even choose which region I actually want to provision this virtual machine into. So it's not just throw it up at whatever Amazon I'm talking to, but choose the actual region and how I want that to happen. So East Coast, West Coast, Asia Pacific, you name it. From there, I can then choose whatever availability zones I want to use, I'll just select this guy, East Coast 1A. And then I can basically choose which instance type I'm trying to run. General purpose, all the way up to the very large, compute optimized, extra large, you name it. So I can use their templates for, we're basically dialing into their Amazon templates that you would actually provision from.
What do we enter our credit card in?
Well, you have to have an account already with that predefined.
Amazon Prime.
So the image, 64-bit, whatever it might be that you actually want to leverage with this, pretty straightforward what you want to use. And then, of course, any security groups, key pair. So these are the guys that are actually on our team here that have been driving this, RSA keys and who owns it. Also the people that get yelled at when we start chewing up too much space and cost here internally. Volume types, what kind of, maybe if we want provisioned IOPS, things that we're doing when we start talking about running our infrastructure inside of Amazon or Azure, right? Or Amazon in this case, we can determine what kind of IOPS we want, what kind of space, how many volumes we need, etc. And then of course what the naming pattern is, who can actually have access to it. And by the way, showcasing some of the AD support and how we actually tie into our security model. Again, it's being refreshed. We're working on making it even stronger and having more granularity, but you get the idea. And finally, our summary. Now, if I click finish, I'm now going to tell Amazon to go ahead and provision that guest. I'm going to get charged for it. And it will then show up on my usage. From that point, then, I can go to that Amazon guest, and I can start working on it. Start doing all of my management that I showed you from the initial console for snapshots, shutting down, powering up, etc. Start migrating data, recovering data into it, etc. Okay? The last bit I want to leave you guys with then, and it's not technology focused. I was told I have to include some marketing level information. Just kidding. Just a bit of a value comparison, right? So everything we've showed, and literally we could probably go for another two hours plus going into double clicking in each one of these kind of different areas and showcasing some of the value. I'd love to show you guys some of the things on reference copy that shows the search all and classification that we can do once we already touch the data and create that metadata. And maybe we can do that in another time. But when we do talk about the virtualization solution set, since it is virtualization field day, let's talk about what it actually means from a hidden cost perspective in protecting these solutions. So, perfect example. I'm a customer. I have one VM instance. I need to have a simplified backup recovery platform to manage that. In many cases, you might buy one solution to go ahead and drive that, have one simple backup repository. Easy peasy, right? We're off and running. And of course, then as I grow, I need to add more of those. And certain vendors, then as you grow and you have more and more of those virtual machines, you need to add in kind of a manager of managers, so to speak, to really provide sort of that top level viewpoint of what's occurring across that environment. Really kind of give that one level of policy access. And of course, you look at that and that might cost you maybe $1,500 per socket, maybe more, maybe less, depending on who that vendor might be. And then of course, you have to realize that if I'm going to be doing this the way I want to at scale, I'm going to start having to use actual SQL Server instances to drive that backend product. You guys probably know who I'm kind of talking about as we're doing our comparisons here, but you get the gist. These are hidden costs that aren't necessarily always called out. And if you're not an enterprise license holder from Microsoft, that can cost you close to $5,000 an instance. You continue to grow that out where you start thinking about then disaster recovery. Again, you have to build out that same instance, build out that same farm. And then, of course, any sort of WAN acceleration for doing that replication. You guys probably kind of get it. Any other considerations? We're looking at some form of search, things that we're building in as a part of our actual platform. That can mean other licensing, other costs, as can adding in something to manage that deduplication on the back end if the built-in technology tool sets aren't up to par. Add that into disaster recovery scenario, and you can quickly see where these hidden costs can drive the cost of your overall virtualization solution. Go back to what we're showing you within our solution from a value perspective. We're basically pricing it at the socket or VM, competitively licensed to those that are in market. We're giving the ability and options to choose and pay per VM based upon the feature that you require. You're going to get the search capability. You have the scalability to grow to thousands of virtual machines under that management. You can build the infrastructure the way you need it. And the only thing we're not showing you here is basically the disk that you'll have to buy to build the actual dedupe infrastructure under the covers. And that can vary based on the partner you want to run with. But we can provide all those specs. And again, at that same point, it's very similar to how those competing vendors would showcase their back-end repositories for where they're protecting information. So we make this incredibly simple to purchase, like we said. It's all about just acquiring that one simple foundation for VMware and adding on those feature sets that you need. See, it's incredibly cost effective to anybody else that's in the marketplace, providing all the advanced feature sets that you need, and like I say, the scale that you're also looking for as well. I'll leave that. Try it free, 30 days. It's on our website. By all means, guys, those that are watching online, we'd love to get more and more people seeing how easy this is actually to deploy, how easy it is to actually execute inside the environment, and see some of those advanced features at work.